Hey there everybody, my name is Kate. Welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. This is kind of a companion, sort of kinda, to a video that I just made. The one before this had a lot to do with dealing with fear and the overlords of the world, of the earth experience, whatever it is that frightens us, whatever the narrative is that's really troubling us and bothering us. And there's a great deal of hypocrisy around religion and spiritual studies even. And I kind of touched on that a little bit with the tithing aspect, and I thought, oh yeah, this is a download that's been percolating for a few weeks now of how to convey this message, because we're at a time when people are really hammered down hard, they're desperate for money, and they're saying all kinds of stuff. So let's talk about something that I've heard in the New Thought movement, in people who claim to not be religious anymore. They're healed, whatever they are. Someone I know used to say they were a healed Catholic and, you know, a healed Southern Baptist and all this other stuff, which hilarious, right? Okay, that they're healed from religion and they are spiritual. However, what I didn't understand, and still just have, my mind just has a hard time wrapping around the concept of, do you understand how hypocritical this is, that there are New Thought or New Age religious or spiritual practices out there, churches designated as such in the New Thought / New Age movement. There are some that claim to be based on the teachings of Jesus Christ, and they also simultaneously teach tithing very heavily. Tithing, 10% at a minimum. And I heard years and years and years ago a woman who was designating herself as changing the entire consciousness of the planet with their poverty thinking, which is great, except that it came through the venue of 10% tithe will get you there. And even at 20 something, when I heard her, I thought, that seems really shady to me, and I just didn't know why. That, you know, why should you have to do it that way? And when I asked some questions about it, I got completely slammed in a group of about 200 or 300 people that I just asked a question trying to understand this process, because I was kind of new to the spiritual movement in that aspect. I'd never seen her before, and at the time she was doing smaller kind of venues. I have no idea what she does now, but she kind of acted like that I didn't want to pull my weight. I just didn't want to give up my money. And I thought, well, it's just odd to me that, you know, giving 10% of money just means you're going to get money back or material possessions. But I couldn't really quite formulate all of that at that time. And so, let's pull forward to now, you know, many years later, and separation from that whole entire concept of tithing. Here's why, is that, first of all, religious studies or spiritual practice that is based in the teachings of Jesus Christ and espousing tithing, Jesus did not talk about tithing. He did not command or say that people should tithe. He did not say that. As a matter of fact, he was pretty critical, if you will, pretty honest and very out there about saying, you know, the Pharisees are under Mosaic law and this is what they're doing. However, it's quite hypocritical that you are straining over a gnat and, you know, not worried about that camel swallowing a camel, that we're getting stuck on the idea that giving a certain amount of your stuff, that you are pious, that you're hypocritical because you're not keeping the other things that are quite important, which would be, what are those three things? Justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And he really didn't wrap his identity or his life purpose or what he was saying or doing around making sure that he got the bank that he was after. He also was not, in the stories that I've heard, and by any admission so far that I've heard, that he wasn't into his whole 3D experience, and it didn't matter to him that he rode in on a donkey, or, you know, he was just a simple man teaching very simple concept. That we have a problem with controlling people. We have a problem with people bullying others and having expectation and being very, very pious about it. And yet we have healed in some of our New Age, New Thought churches. We've healed out of all that, you know, terrible religious stuff, that oppressive stuff, and yet we have people that are teaching within these very confines called churches, in New Thought or not, we're teaching the concept that we have to tithe in order to manifest what we want. And Jesus didn't say that. If we're going to say that we're a Christian-based religion or based on the principles of Jesus Christ, then where do we get the idea that it's just about the 10% we give? And if you're really superstar, you do 20 if you're not too afraid. And that's what really bothered me about this woman who she had issue. I'm like, I don't understand why you feel challenged if you're that, solid about what you're saying. I'm just not understanding, because it seems to me that if you're giving very generously what you have, money is a very practical thing. And by saying, that I gave my last dime because that's what the Old Testament said or somebody else said, wasn't what Jesus said. However, I'm reporting that this is a, Jesus-y type experience here, or a new age, new thought experience that's based in the principles of Jesus Christ. It's really not, because that's not what he said. He said, give generously, then more than receive. However, he didn't say it had to be in the form of cash, and sometimes, when we're pressing people to grow their faith and we're telling them that this is how you do it, it does work because it breaks through some fear barriers. However, the practical application of that is that we have people who are still quite worried about the gnat, not the camel, that we're tithing and we're getting stuff. We're getting evidence that our spiritual-based practice is working, it's successful, it's this. And we have lots of people that are millionaires and kabillionaires and have a consciousness of that they're giving, and maybe, and not all of them, and they're still kind of shady and slick in some other areas. So obviously the demonstration of true spiritual nature and commitment into that path is not based on our bank account. And it's not just because I'm not a millionaire or that other people are. It's that's not the test. That's not the litmus test for whether someone is on a spiritual path or not. They're on a path of learning to manipulate energy, quite frankly, and they're breaking through barriers perhaps about money, because a lot of people are very very riveted on money. It's the way that we exchange goods and services. It's the way we do a lot of stuff. And so there's a lot of energy around it, there's a lot of fear around it, and there's a lot of status. And so if we're really still hooked into the 3D experience, the matrix, or even one little part of it even, then we might be really challenged in that tithing thing, and skip that. What Jesus was saying is, rather than the hypocrisy of coming and making your alms or presenting your stuff at the altar, and making a big deal because we're self-righteous and we're this and we're that. That's not really the idea here. That's old law. And, I don't personally follow myself. I'm not hung up in the Bible or anything. However, people that are, okay, so the way you work around the Old Testament and old law is you just say, well, we don't recognize that. We only do this based on the teachings of Jesus. And then Jesus didn't even say that about that you have to give 10%. That's an Old Testament thing. And so it's confusing, and yet we see it working for some people. It doesn't work all the time. That 100%, if you give 10%, it's going to work 100% of the time. What the way that was explained to me was that, well, you have to build up on that. And okay, so really what we're doing is we're working through the fear of releasing our attachment to whatever it is. And maybe my attachment isn't so much about having the money stuff. Maybe that's not where my greatest fear or my greatest concern is. Might better serve me to, use that money in a different way, like pay my bills, and I'll be over here working on the area that really frightens me more, which maybe that's, in losing a relationship, or in needing to face a terrible disease process alone, or something like that, that would be far more potent and far more powerful, because we're buying into the idea quite a bit, as I've heard it over 35 years of listening, that we're also buying into the idea that once we become these great money manifestors, this tithing monster, that our life cleans up and we're suddenly healthy and that we never have any problems again. And that's just simply not true. That good physical health and all of that doesn't just magically become or happen because we tithed and we learned how to break through that particular barrier. What if we needed really, rather than to learn how to let go of 10%, usually that's the po folks that are there trying to figure out how to make more money. And maybe their hang up really isn't about the cash flow itself. There's a blockage somewhere. However, confusing and muddling the issue with bringing old stuff into new business and, already convoluting it there, and then saying that this is how you become quite successful. This is the hallmark of success. This is what manifestation looks like. It's a racket. In my opinion, it was a racket to say those things because it left me feeling the guilt of, well, I don't agree with that, and yet I don't feel strong yet enough, based on, my poor misunderstanding of what actually was being said. It didn't feel right. And then when I got outed in front of a group, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this woman. I knew her well enough. We'd been a couple of times, and that particular time I was just struggling with, this is really not making sense. It's not feeling good to me. And then to be humiliated in front of a large group, on a microphone, the whole 9 yards, the whole room was looking right at me. And I thought, if that's you and your spiritual practice allows you to get threatened by someone who is merely asking you a question for clarification, if your go-to move is to do something that's just, it lacked any real finesse and it misunderstood the question. This woman jumped right into that I just didn't want to play and give away my money. Well, why are you hanging on to it? I'm like, that's not what I'm asking. And now if I was in that same situation, I would be willing to say, why are you threatened and why are you not listening to what I said? And then back that up into, I wouldn't be there because I'm not interested in learning about a 10% buy-in, because that doesn't change the entire consciousness of the world. Obviously, that was 25 years ago, and this woman's mission was to change the poverty consciousness of the entire planet. Well, obviously, that mission did not succeed, and there's some amount of personal business in terms of making our choices and what have you. You can't force people to change their poverty consciousness. However, we also can't realistically change the poverty consciousness and not talk about all the ways that we are so poor. Money is just one demonstration of that. If we have wealth and we lack integrity, or we play by ghetto janky rules, or we are not humanitarian on any level, we're racist, we're homophobic, we have problems with gender identity, we have problems with sharing, we have problems with, anything that brings up intense reactions and responses, then we've not changed our poverty consciousness. We've talked a lot about the finances of it. However, poverty is not limited to what's in our bank account, because Jesus did say, did he not, that it's far better to be full of justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And by justice, I don't mean exacting justice. I mean in waiting for things to balance. And if you see something out of balance, then what do I do about that? Not to just allow people to suffer because they haven't figured out the 10% buy-in. That also goes into mercy and faithfulness. What do I have faith in? Do I have to keep God, Jesus, Brahma, Allah, whatever I believe in, spirit? Why would I have to keep spirit out of that loop by writing a check and that's the way I do it? It is a way to do it. However, it's not complete if I'm not being told the whole picture, that there's more to it than just obtaining material gain, because we do understand from all of those lovely parables that Jesus talked a whole lot about the quality of life and what we're doing and how healing works. And he didn't discuss tithing. I'm thinking that, a man that was said to be talking about following rituals and old law and being very hypocritical about it, that you're not substituting an intimate relationship with God because you write the check. That's very much kind of what I just said, that you can't just write a check and consider it good. And I've seen really a lot more of that than I've seen some other things. And we also are not required as spiritual creatures to be taking a vow of poverty or chastity or silence or whatever, unless that's how you get your groove and that's how you're getting your groove and it really, really works. Mother Teresa was pretty poor by Earth standards, and she seemed to be, doing okay, and never went hungry more than likely. And neither did Jesus. So the idea of fear mongering, which is part of what my other video was about, is that we're putting into the consciousness, the collective consciousness of Earth, we put into this idea that success and wealth looks like financial gain, and that we are not master manifestors, we are not healers, we're not legit spiritual people, we're not something if we don't have money to back it up. Money is merely one way that our spirit and our journey exerts itself. And so to say that because I'm not a millionaire, yes, there's a bunch of people on the planet that are very high vibrational, and there's far more that are not. And you have people who are by earth standards poor that are very high vibrational, and it has nothing to do with what their consciousness is towards money, perhaps. You know, that's a very individual thing. And as long as we're being able to answer the question with, where are your priorities? What are you doing to be walking on your spiritual path? How is it happening for you? If the first thing I were to tell someone is that you need to lose 10% of your income in order to get, you know, the riches of heaven, and that's all I talk about, then I've missed the boat, and I absolutely missed what, you know, Jesus Christ principles would teach me about that. Of what I've studied is that if this man didn't even mention it, and he talks a whole lot about service to other people, right service, not just being a doormat to someone, but righteous action may or may not look like writing a check, or may or may not look like tithing. He himself did not, nor did he call anyone to that order. So I find it quite hypocritical and strange that the New Age Pharisees are pretty much living by old doctrine that this is how you get there, because we have a lot of people who stop short of their spiritual journey because they got happy with the wealth and forgot that, yeah, giving generously is a part of the receiving. However, it's far better to give than to receive. And even better that if we go and very piously drop our, you know, stuff at the altar, when we have beef with our brother, please go fix beef with your brother before you set anything down at the altar, because it's somewhat hypocritical, isn't it? That's kind of what he was saying. It's exactly what he was saying, that if you have problems, your tithe is not going to buy your way out of doing the work of imbalanced or karmic relationships that need to be cleaned up. We can't just 10% it, even 20% it, or any other percent it, other than 100% honesty about where are my blockages. Where have I wronged someone? Where have they wronged me? Where do I have hardness in my heart? Where is my third eye calcified and blind as it can be? Where do I need to look at myself in comparison to humanity? How do I feel about certain sects of society? How do I feel about giving of myself generously? How do I feel about doing free work? How do I feel about volunteering? How do I feel about humanitarian aid as a whole? How do I feel about Mother Earth and recovering with her? How do I feel about the animals that live here that have been dropping out by the hundreds, the species we're losing to the abuse? Those kinds of issues. And those would be the kind of issues that I want to be answering those questions, because going into the new age, which is the age of Aquarius, is where we look at cooperation and collaboration in a completely different way of doing things. And one day, more than likely, I would imagine, I don't have any hard and fast on this, but one day, you know, money will mean a whole lot less, and it already does to a bunch of people that are going off the grid, and they're not moving into bomb shelters. They're going into minimalist living because they're tired of keeping up with all the trappings of, I got all this stuff. Stuff is great, however, stuff is a tool, and when we use money as something that's a nefarious tool, or we use the understanding of that money and how to acquire it as a tool, and we're selling the idea, we're just selling the old paradigm in a dressed up version, and it still hits a glass ceiling that might be more high vibrational. It might be, it could be. However, it's interpreted quite a bit that as I was told, that you give 10% where you are gaining your spiritual nourishment. And that's where I fell down hard, was that I'm not getting it from that church experience. It's just not happening, because I hear a whole lot of hypocrisy and bullshit, quite frankly, that I'm not supporting, and that's not feeding me. So I went outside, you know, the lines already with, yeah, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to absolutely reach out to places or people that actually nourish my soul, and none of them were churches. Anytime that I released a check or some cash or whatever into a church situation, one of those New Thought movement things, I didn't feel good about it. And it had nothing to do with the amount of money that was being spent there. It had nothing to do with that. And I was clear about that, but super confused about, why do I feel okay with sending a $150 check to Wayne Dyer, who's a millionaire, and saying my spiritual practice that I'm getting into says that I tithe to where I'm being spiritually nourished. And man, I get a lot of really great stuff from your words. Thank you very much. That meant more to me than any check that I released into a church situation. And they were all New Thought situations, not, anything else, because I didn't grow up in a church officially. So that was even a little bit stranger, that I'm here supposed to be being nourished by this stuff because it's dictated as, the new understanding, and yet it doesn't feel good to me. Why would it need to go to this particular place? And there is something to be said. A minister once told me that, well, there's some sort of responsibility as a congregant that, we pay into the system. And that's, well, I can understand that. I mean, yes and no. That if we truly, as an individual, as a congregation, as a minister, as a leader, as a, plebe on the side of the road, nobody, if we truly believe what we say we believe, then we're not relying exclusively on the congregation or exclusively on a donor or exclusively on anything except the source of where all of that comes from. And that comes from up there, God, if you will, then that will pour down in a million different ways. And if we're only locking ourselves into that it's 10% where you're spiritually nourished, and spiritually nourished means where you go to church, that puts me in the hot seat for I don't attend a church on a regular basis. I'm not even one of those spiritually ones. I don't attend church there, so I'm already wrong. And it was just really a holy mess, quite frankly, with trying to figure out, how do I do this? And what I found is that I have greater peace in my heart. I don't have a problem giving away money. I've given away thousands when I had very little to give, over time, all in one chunk, because that's just me personally. It's not the money itself. I've been without, quite a bit of things throughout my lifetime, and I've also had quite a few things throughout my lifetime. So I understand both sides of the fence, but it was more important to me to get to the healing and the understanding that that is a religious type of abuse to dictate to me how I'm going to really be spiritually nourished and fed, first of all, and how I'm going to honor that. And the way that I spend most of my time when I'm in that tithing mode or wishing to appreciate, which is often, more often than I'm going to write a check or drop a 20, that practice of being able to appreciate, truly appreciate, and then give generously, where I know I can give generously and there's no strings attached, that I'm not putting into it any weirdness. And that's where I had problem, was that when I sent a check to a church one time, I was in a church situation, a New Age church, a New Thought church. I sent that, or put the check in the thingy, and it didn't feel good to me because I felt pushed that it has to be there, it has to be that. And what wasn't explained is that what Jesus really meant was giving fully from your heart, and really, really not wanting to see your brother suffer, not wanting to see your sister in a bind, not wanting to leave, people just in the outreaches of nowhere. If they choose to be in those places, there's nothing we can do. However, when we have hungry, starving people, let's feed them first. And then we'll worry about teaching them their poverty consciousness. But when we're worried about fixing our own poverty consciousness via one particular method, and it's to make more money, we're not fixing our poverty consciousness. We're putting a Band-Aid on it and diverting our attention about what really the problem is. Because money is just merely one aspect of this experience. And yes, it does buy us a lot of stuff. However, it has not yet one time bought me anything that has meant to me more than my own sovereignty, or being able to go into the mountains and make offerings to Mother Gaia and to my spiritual team, to God, to the ascended realms, whatever your understanding of that is. I make offerings there, and I go to great lengths to do that. And I don't say that because I am saying I'm better. I'm saying that that's how I needed to reach that place of, okay, cool, that I no longer have the same attachment to or fear of, oh my goodness, what happens if? It showed a whole lot more faith in my world to be able to let go of things that were even more important to me, like relationships, or like, a certain job, things like that. Whereas, the money itself, okay, that hasn't ever been a huge attachment for me. So for people who that isn't really where that is, then it's probably a better angle to teach a more wide angle view, that Jesus really didn't say this stuff. We're kind of combining, several parts of the same book, kinda, and yet we've developed a whole Christian, understanding based on the teachings of Jesus. And it's really, it's so out of balance and it's so out of alignment that I never could quite put my finger on it until I started studying more closely and stopped listening to even spiritualists, because false prophets are everywhere. And we're all a false prophet 24/24 in some way or another. We all speak mistruth at some point because we don't always understand everything. It's just a matter that when we put it out there as authority, and I'm here to change the entire world with this one idea, well, that one idea didn't catch because not everybody's doing it. And the Jesus thing, his one idea about, love everyone equally, I like that one because it covers everything else. So I hope that's been helpful to you, and I hope that you're enjoying your day, whatever part of the day you're in. And remember, get within your skin, because that will help you to find, where's my spiritual nourishment coming from, and where do I care to place my attention, my focus, and my energy to support that? What do I want to see going forward? How attached am I to this money, this pair of shoes, this car, this person, this anything? And any place where I'm overly attached, that's really where the problem is. For a lot of people, it is money. However, it's not everybody. So anyway, as I said, enjoy your day and get within your skin, because right there in your skin, you're divine. It's totally, totally, totally fine. Take care of yourselves, friends, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye.